I'm Tanya Fox, and you're listening to Fox Talks Business Podcast. I started my career in the corporate world, but always played to my own tune and loved to think outside of the box. This didn't always serve me well with the bosses, so I made the decision to become an entrepreneur. And that little seed of entrepreneurial curiosity continued to grow as I branched out into retail, service, and franchise businesses. Now, I have been fortunate to have amazing successes in the last 2 decades, but they did not come without some really big failures and even bigger lessons learned. And that's why I started this podcast, not just to share the failures, but to show you how you can turn every failure into a success. We're going to hear from some amazing humans from around the world that are going to share their stories of the good, the bad, and the motivational entrepreneurial life has to offer. After all, life is too short to make all of the mistakes yourself, so why not learn from each other? And of course, we're going to have some fun, because as I always say, well, you know what? I'll tell you that at the end of the episode. So thank you so much for coming on the show today, Susan. I'm so excited to have you and learn more about your story.
Thank you very, very much for having me from cold, wet United Kingdom.
Well, we are cold. We're not wet, but we're a little snowy here in Alberta. But it's so great. We were talking off air about how amazing it is that in today's technology, we can have conversations like this so easily with people from all around the world. So I'm really excited about that.
It's such a privilege.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your background, a little bit about your story of sort of how you got here, because it's quite interesting.
Yeah, it's quite a journey in a way, isn't it? People will think about me because I'm a public speaker and I train people in making an impact in business conversations as well as public speaking. Oh, it's all right for you. It must be really easy. You must have been a complete natural at it. But that was very much not the case in it for me, because I was one of those kids who was quite quiet, quite reluctant in class at certainly at secondary school to speak out. I now discovered that I do have dyslexia. So reading, when I mispronounced things and everyone laughed at me, there was a real reason for that. But it brought a lot of anxiety for me, to the point that when I went for an interview for a Saturday job, which you used to do when you were a schoolgirls, I didn't speak at all in the interview. And of course, they didn't even bother to call me back. And even at my school, we had prefects. And I had to lead the prayers one week in front of the entire school. I paid with my own pocket money to get someone else to do it for me. I just couldn't face it.
Well, and it's true. Like I remember being in school and doing the reading, and I would because everybody would get like one paragraph, and I would count the kids, and then I would pre-read my paragraph a couple times, totally ignoring what everybody, I had no idea what was going on, but I just knew my paragraph. And I remember once it got to me and I was like, oh, and I spoke with confidence and and the teacher's like, that's not the right paragraph. It's actually the next one. And I was mortified. I actually ran out of the classroom crying because I was so upset, because I was like, no, that's the one I practiced. So I feel you on that. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt your story, but
you get it, don't you? And willing that the bell would go before you think, oh, the 5 more before me. Let's
just stutter a little bit more, buddy.
But that was me. And then, even at university, I was in a tutorial with 2 other students, and yet when it was me delivering the paper, the anxiety and the wet armpits I was talking about, and all of that was very much me. And I had messages from my family not to show off, to not be quiet and only speak when you're spoken to. So there were a lot of messages there that I should not shine. And yet I went on, when I was a bit older, to music college, stepped into the limelight, and was a professional singer, singing in front of 3,000 people with a big orchestra behind me as a soloist.
And that's crazy. So how did that, because that's such a It almost seems like such a contrast for,
Definitely.
not wanting to be in the limelight to, yeah, stick me center stage.
Yeah. Bring me the light.
Where are my people?
I mean, believe me, I'm not like that, but I own the light when I need to. There were a few things that happened. I think that obviously when you're a little bit older, and the fact that you said this about school, that you were dreading speaking, in adolescence, we are all self-conscious and we have our own things going on, don't we? But in my case, there were a few situations that happened to me. Unfortunately, I was involved in a very serious car accident in my early 20s when I lived in Kenya because I was teaching out there. And I came back with nothing physically. I had life-changing injuries. Mentally, obviously, I was absolutely shattered, and I had a long way to move forward. But after a number of months, a friend of mine from university said, "Why don't you come along to a choir?" Because I sang in choirs. And so I went in with my sticks and I had to audition. And I'd never auditioned before. And the conductor stopped me and said, "Susan, you've got a remarkable voice. I really think you should go and get it trained." Now, you and I now would think, okay, I'll go and have a word with him and see if he can arrange all of those things. But
Yeah.
I was in a place to do that. However, it did stick. And eventually I found a singing teacher, and it became apparent that it would be worth my while going to music college. So I got scholarships to go there as a slightly more mature student. And then as a result of that, not only had I got permission to shine, but also I learned lots of techniques about managing fear and anxiety and oh yes, giving myself permission to do that. So that's how that journey went.
And do you find like, because I get that all the time too, because you can throw me somewhere. And if you're like, hey, we need you to go up on stage and talk about something that I know about, I'm okay. Like I'll go up and I'll talk about it. And people go, oh, I wish I had that skill. But the funny thing is that I'm so nervous before everything. Like even now, I'm sitting in my own home. I'm like incomfortable. But even before this interview, I was like, okay, we're going to do this. It's going to be great. Like, but I still get those butterfly, kind of feelings. Do you still find that as well? Like that's just something that never kind of goes away?
Absolutely, it's all part of it. And I think that one of the keys is learning to manage your fear and trusting yourself that you can push it out of the way, that you know that you're going to feel in a particular way beforehand, but you've got the experience that it's gone right before. And actually you can use that adrenaline, because that's what it is essentially, to do for the very best you can. And I often question people that say, "Oh, I don't get nervous beforehand." It's almost as though they've got a lack of energy when they do start, because they've not got that little buzz.
Yeah, and it really is, I thinking back to like it's been so long since we've been able to meet here in Canada, but even the last time that I was on stage, I always think that I almost draw on that for my energy. It's how I'm so energetic, I'm sure, because beforehand I'm so pent up going, I hope this goes well and I hope I don't like sneeze on stage or
Yeah,
like I can think of great scenarios that would never happen, but
oh,
so
definitely.
yeah. So you started your podcast, which we had talked about, which has been going for 7 years. But you also started a company about 12 years ago. So tell us a little bit about Superstar Communicator and why you started that company.
Oh, Superstar Communicator is the brand name of my methodology, which is Superstar Communicator. Yeah, just just 2 words, because I can't remember anymore. But essentially, it is about empowering individuals and teams to communicate really well with impact in business communication. So it could be everything from a podcast interview like we're doing through to public speaking or being on the media or pitching. And the methodology that I have, I identify 5 key areas that I believe are essential for you to make a positive impact. And I'm particularly interested in those people like you and me when we were 14 reading in class,
Right.
wanted to hide under the desk. That there are many people who are absolutely amazing, who've got great ideas, who are fantastic workers, who perhaps are not shining as much as they can because either they don't have the confidence to speak out in meetings, or they don't feel that they can step into the limelight at those moments. Now, I'm not saying that everybody should be jazz handy at work in business. However, there are certain times when, you know, if you've got a great idea, if you've got an opinion in a meeting, you really, really should step up and say it and have the confidence to do it in an effective way. And so the company is all about that.
And I really like what you said about stepping up and speaking, but in an effective way, because I think that's
Oh,
what stops people a lot, is that they go, I have something to say, but then that, you know, that doubt comes in of, but is what I have to say important, or how can I word it? So let's talk a little bit more, because I think there's a lot of people listening that can be like, yeah, I really wish I could speak up more. I wish I could sort of have the voice. So let's talk a little bit about the 5 key areas, if you're willing to give away some
yeah,
of your secrets.
absolutely. So in a nutshell, the 5 areas are audience, content, preparation, performance, and voice. So if I summarize each of them, go into a little bit of information.
Yeah,
So
please do.
audience, initially I think about what's the purpose of you talking? And I would say, dare I say, extroverts, don't take this the wrong way, but there is a tendency for extroverts to speak as they're thinking, whereas introverts will reflect first and then speak. So it might be that you should reflect first rather than speaking. Because, because
Yeah.
we know what we're saying there.
I'm like thinking of some people and I'm like,
Yeah,
yeah.
but
And even myself sometimes, where I'm like, yeah, done that.
yeah, but it might not be of value to the meeting of the conversation, for example. So what's the purpose of you saying this? Whether it's a Facebook Live, whether it's a LinkedIn Live, whether it's any sort of conversation, what's in it for the audience? Who's your audience? Do you know anything about them? Have you done some research on them? Do you listen to them? All of those things. And there are lots of exercises we do around that. We drill down and for some clients, we think of specific scenarios. There might be a really tricky meeting that they always find difficult with a client. And we drill down and find out what might be going on, what might their audience, what might their client need to hear that will build up trust.
I love that. Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm happy to talk more about that if you like. Then content is really interesting because we are all experts at what we do, aren't we? We've all got a huge amount of knowledge. And you were interesting earlier on when you were saying that you are sometimes asked to do things, a topic you know. Of course it's going to be much easier because you know it's your thing, just like me talking about Superstar Communicator. But there are ways that you can construct it. So having a really good beginning, having a call to action at the end, something that people should do, otherwise they're thinking, oh, how can I contact Susan? That sort of thing. Do I need to have information back from everybody by Friday at 4 p.m. so that I can write this report? Making it clear, then people know what they need to do. I'm a great believer in brief speaking, which basically means, particularly in the virtual setting, because people's minds wander, we get distracted even more. By keeping things headline and not going into too much detail can really, really help the listener. From a psychological point of view, if you go too technical, our brains aren't able to cope with that. It's very, very tiring on the brain, and then we get distracted and we fill up those little gaps with what we think it should be. So it could be that somebody hears something incorrectly, not because they haven't been listening, but just they don't have the brain capacity to take in all of that information. And I feel that if you keep everything at headline, at top level, then people will ask if they need that information.
That is so true. And I so wish we would have talked a couple of days ago, because I actually, as you were saying this, I realized that I was actually in this situation where I sent an email to a client and I was trying to be very specific. And so I spelled everything out, and all it did was cause confusion, where I thought that I was answering any questions that would come up, and it just caused more confusion. And when I just responded, because I always get told I'm too blunt, I'm not fluffy, and I just heard this term, like, you're just very matter of fact, and that kind of sometimes rubs people the wrong way. So I was trying to be like, hi, how are you, hope your weekend was good, whereas usually I'm like, here, I need this, where's this report, end of emails, very short and to the point. And it was funny when I went into, like you said, I sort of delved too far into that story. It just ended up causing more confusion because, of course, those weren't the questions that they had. I was assuming.
Yes. Yeah. So if you provide small amount of information, maybe put a link into an article or a podcast or a video, if that's your thing, then they will come back to you with questions.
Yeah. And I love that. Allow them to ask the questions, because maybe they
Yeah.
don't need it. Maybe they're like, perfect. That's exactly what I
Yeah.
was looking for. I love that. That's a
And
great tip.
actually being, I mean, being blunt, it can be whoa for some people. However, being straightforward and very clear and concise and focused is a gift to everybody, because you don't need to take in too much then. It's just very clear.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that. I love the difference between the two for sure. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, that's great. Okay. Number
And
3. Or did you have more on that one? I'm sorry. Here, I'm pushing. I'm getting so excited.
there's another thing, and that's storytelling. Now, storytelling is the sort of in vogue thing to do. And I'm not talking about writing a bloody novel when you're trying to describe something. And some people don't appreciate that. If we're thinking about being brief, we can still create a story around something that can illustrate what we're trying to explain. So if you're a lawyer, or if you're in financial services and there are some compliance things that you need to share with a client, of course you've got to say those first, but then use a story or case study to illustrate it, to give an example so people can understand. And again, we're hardwired to remember that the sort of journey of the story, the beginning, the the fact there was a challenge, this is how we sorted it out, happy client.
Right. Yeah. I love that. I love that. Yeah,
And
that's
so
very
people,
true.
and you don't need to go, I've done quite a bit of research on different types of stories, and some of them are so complicated I would need a PhD to understand them, let alone create them. And we're not talking about, as I say, about a fiction novel. We're just talking about another way of conveying information to somebody else.
And I think that that's so true, because I think, like you said, a lot of people retain that information better, but also it makes it easier to understand. Because I know, like, I used to be, well, I mean, I still kind of am, but used to be heavily into the financial industry. And when you're talking numbers, I would have so many clients that would never ask, because they would feel, insecure, or they would just feel like I should know this already, like what she was talking about. And so, thinking back, I usually would give them like kind of a story, like this is what happened to company ABC. And this is, this is the good side of it and the bad side of it. And then they'd go, oh, okay, I understand what this is
Yeah.
all about now.
Yeah.
So yeah, I didn't even realize that I was doing that, but I have to continue to do that consciously.
It's a very good way of also people remembering things, because we remember how we feel when we hear those stories, and we are hardwired from being babies to have stories told to us.
So true. So true. Yeah. Oh, I love that.
So that's all about content. And then the next one is preparation. And there are always people who wing it.
I've done that.
I mean, we all have. We all have winged it. But I'm surprised at the number of people that I have worked with that say, oh, can you help me with this presentation? I'm doing it next week. Well, what are you talking about? I don't know yet. I've got the slides.
That seems a little backwards.
Yeah, exactly. But they're thinking about the slides and how it looks and how it appears, and then they're moving the slides around. So there's nothing agreed. And of course, that's going to create anxiety. So preparing that, practicing it, and also I talk a lot about managing your fear, so that you can prepare yourself, so that you can step up and push that fear out of the way and have your own routine to be able to step out and manage that fear.
And I think, even going back to like when you were saying that decided to, go into music, that first time on stage, can you give our audience maybe a couple of techniques that you used? Because that must have been pretty intimidating, when
Oh,
the
goodness.
proverbial curtains open and you're like, well.
Oh, I mean, there were times when I was absolutely terrified. I remember my knees shaking on occasions, but actually one of the things that I think is most important is developing self-evaluation techniques. And this is also part of performance. And this is something that I learned from a sports psychology coach who originally worked with Olympians. And when you're in athletics or something like that, it's either you win or you lose.
Yep.
It's a binary thing, isn't it? Whereas for performance like public speaking, like what I do, it's more woolly, and you can go down the route of, you come off stage, your adrenaline drops, you are in a very vulnerable emotional state because of that, and it's easy to beat yourself up and think, oh, I got that wrong, I got that wrong. But actually going away, looking after yourself, and then later on thinking, you know what, my aims for this were that I would make sure that I was brief and concise, that I listened to everybody else's point of view, that I answered questions effectively so that they really understood. How did I get on in those things? What could I do better next time? And that is a really, really useful thing to do.
Yeah. I like that. I like that.
But I
All right.
normally do that with performance.
Yeah.
But getting back to your actual question, because I digress slightly. Yeah, at first I used to get absolutely terrified, but actually I slowly learnt that what was the most important thing was to be in the moment, to not think outside my own bubble. So I was still listening to the music, I was still performing with the other musicians, my colleagues, but not to think, oh gosh, there are this number of people in the audience. Oh, what are they going to say? All of that little voice going on. So if you can be in the moment and just be calm and just think about the next note, the next 5 notes, the next scene, all of those things, And then it just helps you with the fear and any anxiety you might be having. And this is a technique that I know that tennis players use, that idea that they are literally thinking about the next stroke, the next rally. And they're not thinking about, oh, if I win this rally, then I'll have won the game, and I'll have won the set, and I'll have won the match, and I'm playing against this person or this person in the next round. Those things can distract you from what's going on here and now.
That's so true, because I even remember back, like my only thought was I was terrified I would pass out on stage when I first started talking. And so that was my only, like that was my goal. Just make it off the stage standing. And then it doesn't matter. Like, as if you do that, it's a success. Now, of course, years and years and years later, my goals sort of grew. But I think I like what you said about just having that, like not thinking too far ahead, and being like, well, if I do this, then I'll, this is where it's going to take me, is just really, really being in that moment, which I think a lot of us don't do because our minds just constantly move to the next thing, the next thing, the
They
next
do.
thing.
Yeah. And also, there was something I was going to say then. I'm sure it will come back to me in a moment. Oh yeah, that's
Say
it.
it when it does.
Yes. One, I think that we all have a little voice, don't we? We all have that little voice, particularly when we're anxious, thinking, oh, no one will listen to my podcast. What I'm doing is a load of rubbish, or have I got the credibility? If you start thinking about your audience, I'm serving them. The purpose of this talk is that I'm going to share some incredible information with them that could really, really help them with their job, or something like that. All of a sudden, something magical happens. That little voice goes, oh, all right, I'll go away, because it's your ego speaking. And once you're focused on something else, it's no longer pressure on your ego.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a great tip. I think that's so true, because I think too often people, go to too grand of a scheme, realizing that, really, I think most of us, if we really peel all of the layers, we just want to change or make a difference in one person's life.
Yeah.
But the way social media and everything is, we keep like going too grand scheme, and it's like, I think we all need to focus back on that, that one person, just one person.
Yeah.
And then I can move to another person, and then another person, and see how many I can get, kind of thing.
And maybe the measurement, if you are speaking, if we go back to speaking in real life or a podcast, if one person, one listener comes back to you and says, do you know what? I really enjoyed that episode that you did. As a result of that, I'm doing X, Y, Z. That, for me, is far more important than the number of likes. That
Yeah.
person taking the time to come up to you afterwards and say, I really enjoyed that. I'm going to try this. What a gift.
Yeah, I agree. Oh, I love that. So performance. We kind of delved into that a little bit, but I'm trying not to get you off track. I'm sorry. I'm just so excited.
So performance, obviously, there's the actual performance. I do think that it's worthwhile coming up with a self-evaluation thing, so that when you come off stage, at least you can celebrate what you've done well, and then think about things to make it even better, because it's never everything is brilliant. There are always things to work on. However, from a performance point of view, I believe that it's around your facial expressions, your body language, your gestures, all of that, and the energy that you give. It might be that you got a long speech that you're doing. I mean, I don't know anything about the type of speeches that you did. I don't know if you did long keynotes.
Sometimes it would range, but I would say usually an hour and a half was
Yeah.
sort of, it seems to be kind of typical. Unless I was doing a workshop, which I is different, I feel.
Yeah. And the thing is that you've got to pace yourself within that hour and a half, don't you?
Oh, for sure.
So think you know, thinking about the performance, because a 30-minute or even a TED talk, 18 minutes, is a very, very different animal to a 1.5 hour keynote. And thinking about pacing yourself within that, breaking things down so that the audience will still be with you for that. And something that I've come across quite often is that keynote speakers who decide that they want to run workshops find that quite difficult at first, because they're going hell for leather as if it's a 45-minute for half a day, and then they're exhausted.
Yeah.
And it's almost an athletic thing, isn't it? It's the difference between perhaps a 400-meter race and a marathon.
Well, and I always find too that, like you were saying before, on like really gauging your audience, because, even, when I think of some of the workshops, some are very, very engaged and some are like, just give me the information, I'll deal with it later, kind of thing. So, I think, having all of those pieces together are really important as well.
Oh, definitely. And it might be that your audience, the type of profile of the audience, they want to have a different type of talk. They might want to have some videos. They might want to have some engagement with voting on their phones. They might, all of those things. Whereas other audiences, and I would possibly put financial services in that more, they might want to have a deliver information more with less engagement.
Yeah. And I remember I used to be the president of our local chamber. And that was one thing I used to always say to the accountants, like, can you bring like a little kazoo or something? Like you literally make people fall asleep. Like anything, just something to liven up. Because it's numbers, it's boring. I got it. But like just anything, like just be like a woohoo here and there when there's a good number. So but I do remember the following year when they did the report, he did have like one of those little like slide whistle things, and he used it, and it was so funny because afterwards he was like, I never had so many people come up and say, I really enjoyed that. That was really good. So it's just funny that it was just, um, which, looking back on all of your tips, I wasn't consciously doing it, but I was sort of looking and going, the audience really needs you to liven up a little bit, like we're falling asleep here listening to these now, because it really was like, and in this line we did 15,000 and you'll see the expenses. And it was like very monotone the whole
Oh,
time. I'm sure
but
there's some people going, oh, I've been at that meeting.
yeah, but that's an example of handing out that information beforehand and saying, just look at this beforehand, and if there are any questions, we will take them at the meeting.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's a great, I think a great tip for people that are having to present something that, is like financial statements, just because I know that sort of feel. But if you have to present something that is a little kind of boring, or something that people usually tend to like their eyes gloss over at the meeting, is maybe finding different ways to make it more engaging, like you said, the voting buttons or something like that. So
There are various software that you can download for that engagement, which is worthwhile looking into. And certainly on Zoom, you can do polls, which is fun, use the chat. And those are certainly things that I use, because it's really important to have that.
yeah.
And it's important for the speaker as well, because if people are engaged, if they're voting, if there's no one voting.
Right. That's true, because I think Zoom it's funny because I always say to my son's been doing at home schooling. He's back in school now finally, but I always felt so bad for his teacher because every kid would just have like a circle with like their letter in it. Like there was no photos of the high school kids, whereas like the grade school kids are like, look, I have bananas. This is that's my dad's shoe. Like they're all on camera showing a bunch of different stuff. Meanwhile, the high school is just like, no picture, no picture, no picture. The teacher's like, are you here? Can I get a good morning? Like, is anything happening? Like it's, so I think that helps too, because it's hard when you feel like you're speaking to nobody.
Yeah, absolutely. So funny. But yeah, that I think that I've covered quite a bit about performance. Eye contact, gestures, keeping that energy going, really good body language. Those are all crucial, aren't they? Whether you are in a meeting face to face or something like here.
Yeah.
And that the performance side. Now, there is one communications model which is vastly under well, it's misquoted.
Okay.
It's Meribian's work, and he identified 3 areas of personal communication. That's the actual what you say, your vocal tone, and your body language, the sort of visual cues that you give off, and they include what you're wearing, of course. I went to a network meeting probably 10 years ago, and with due respect to image consultants, she said to me that 93% of personal communication was what you wear. Yep.
I don't know if I'd agree with that.
Yes, I thought, yes, now's the time for me to go back to the original work that Meribian did. So I read all of his papers, which are freely available on the internet if you look hard enough. And he said quite rightly that what you say is part of the communication, then the vocal tone and your non-verbal communication, including what you wear, not 93% what you wear. And he says quite rightly that if everything's matched, so you're speaking and you're saying something profound, but vocally it matches it, and also your body language matches that, then you're going to make a massive amount of impact. But if you distract your audience by saying something profound, but your body language is like this, oh, I'm a leader and I'm really proud to be here, your brain is going to think, well, that doesn't match. I'm getting distracted by the fact that she looks as though she wants to be anywhere but leading this team.
Right.
And so then that's when you don't make an impact. And that's down to the performance side. So really being aware of your vocal tone, and voice is last, of course, and your body language matching what you're saying is really, really crucial.
And do you think that has a lot to do also with conviction in what you're saying? Because I find some people have talked and it's almost like they don't believe what they're selling, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
I don't know if I'm explaining that right.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It could be that they aren't confident in what they're saying, or maybe they're not confident in their abilities, which is a shame.
Mm-hmm.
Or perhaps even that they are frightened that they're going to get shouted down because of the environment that they are speaking in.
Wow. Well, those are great. There's so many tips in there. Like my page is almost full of stuff that I'm just scribbling away.
The last one is the voice, of course.
Yes. So let's talk about that, because that's obviously a key one in communicating.
Yeah. But one that people often forget about. And I certainly believe that you should speak so it's as easy as possible for other people to listen to you. So if you speak really fast, or you speak in a monotone way, like you were mentioning before, or you mumble, or you've got a really strong accent, it's going to make it hard work for the listener. And you know as well as I do that they are going to switch off.
Right. Yeah. Especially if they find it hard to understand.
Exactly.
But we don't think that, like, and it's so funny because, I have this conversation. Of course, we were talking about how, we've sort of have this world where we can talk to so many people. I've always been very, very fortunate that I can understand a lot of different accents. And if they're very thick, I still understand them. But I forget that a lot. So I'll be out somewhere and someone will be talking. My husband will be like whispering in my ear, what did they just say?
Yeah.
But yeah, like I think keeping that in the forefront, if you're somebody who doesn't have that problem, because I think, I understand it so much that maybe there are times that I'm not considering that when I'm speaking because I'm so used to my own voice.
Certainly for English people, and I would imagine that it's same for Canadians, that we assume that everybody's going to understand English.
True. True.
And it might not be always the case. It might be that somebody, French person, that's on the board with you, that is speaking, but and they've reached that stage, they're very fluent in English, but actually there might be a few words that they don't understand. They don't pick up on them because everybody has relaxed and is not considering that.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
there's somebody that lives around the corner to me, and he's also a trainer, and he's got a very thick Scottish accent.
Which is
He
a hard
knows
one for a lot of people.
it's a hard one. If he's, well, not that you're allowed to go anywhere at the moment in Scotland. You're certainly not allowed to go back into Scotland. He knows if he goes back to Glasgow, which is where he's from, he can speak with the strongest Glaswegian accent because everyone will get him. Whereas down here, he knows he has to modify his accent, really take care with his diction to make sure it's clear for his clients.
And I love that. I think that's a really, a really good tip is really considering what you sound, or even finding somebody who maybe, English isn't their first language and asking those questions. Do you find it, easy to understand me? Am I pronunciating properly? Am I too fast? I have a tendency of being a fast talker, so I have to really especially when I'm on stage, be conscious about it. But when I'm just in a conversation, I have to say, I myself don't think of it. I just talk as it, as it comes to me. So that's definitely something that I know I need to work on is how am I doing this at all times, not just,
Yeah, we have, when we relax, we speak naturally, don't we? And yet that might be the time when it becomes more challenging for somebody who speaks English as their non-native tongue. And we don't want to exclude individuals from a conversation.
Yeah. Oh, I think that's a really great tip, especially for me. I don't know. I'm getting a lot out of this. So thank you.
That's what I like to hear.
So we had mentioned that you had started your podcast. Tell us a little bit about why you decided to start that, and then a little bit about what people can expect when they listen.
I ummed and ahed for quite a while. I knew in my heart of hearts that it was a really, really good medium for me, because about speaking and everything and communication, and it could demonstrate my expertise, but also to bring in other people, to ask them how they use spoken communication in their careers, in their businesses. And I really wanted to empower those people that I think of, those quiet people that might not be shining enough in meetings and not demonstrating to their bosses that they deserve that pay rise or to go up to a partner or be a senior person. I procrastinated for a while because 7 years ago, it was much more difficult to do things, dare I say it. And it was actually, uploading to iTunes that I was terribly worried about. I have no idea looking back. You look back and think, really?
Because it
And
seems so, yeah, it seems so easy now, but it's true. Like now, podcasting is almost a household name. There's very few people who don't have an idea of what it is. They might not listen, but they have an idea. Whereas, yeah, even if we go back 5 years, it was not a common thing.
no, it certainly wasn't. And so I don't know about Canada, but it was definitely not in the United Kingdom. And there what if you think even 7 years ago, there wasn't Instagram around. We weren't using social media quite as much as we do now. Now, when podcasts are launched, there's a whole pre-launch and a launch, and all of
There's a
this.
lot of work.
There's a lot of work going around that, which I didn't have. But also editing, all of those things. I hadn't done any of that before. I don't come from a journalistic background. So learning all of that, and it's great going back to those early ones. When anybody says to me, oh, it's all right for you, you know, you get all right for you because you do it. It's all very easy. I said, just go and listen to some of the very early ones. And I keep those there because that demonstrates the journey I've been on to get where I am. And if that empowers anybody, then that's brilliant.
And I think that that's so true. Like, and that's what I always say. You're never going to like your first one. You will when you first do it. But when you get about like 10 down and you listen to that, then you're like, oh, that wasn't good at all.
Yeah,
Right. Like, but that's good because I think that means, I think when you look back on some of the previous stuff that you did, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel that lets you know if you can look back on one and go, oh, that wasn't very good. I would change this or I would do that. That means that you obviously have improved. If you go
yeah,
back and listen to your first one and you're like, oh, mwah, it was brilliant, then you don't have that sense of improvement that you've been getting better.
definitely. Absolutely. And one of the things that I use my podcast for, I always thought of it as being another resource, more content. So as well as blogging, this was content that would, demonstrate my expertise. But also, have been able to invite people that perhaps were slightly outside my network, and people like Jason, who we both know. He actually approached me, not the other way around. But as a result of that, I now know his work, he knows mine, and that's widened my connections. That's how I got to know you too. And that is brilliant. Some people would do that as a strategic way of building their network. But even so, it does raise credibility. And for my training that I do with people, I often share a couple of episodes of the podcast because they're a great resource.
Yeah, I love that. So if people are interested in finding your podcast, where is the best place for them to go for that specifically?
Oh, well, you can go to iTunes. It's listed on all of the main podcast directories, and you just need to Google in Superstar Communicator podcast, and I'm sure that it will come up in various directories. If you've already got one on your phone, an app, it's bound to come up. Well, I hope so.
It did. I Googled it just this morning really quickly and it came up really easily. So it's very easily found. And we'll make sure that we link to it as well on our blog post. So if someone else is sitting out there and they're like, I still feel like I need more work, or if they're going, oh my gosh, everything they said is me. Like that's me. I have those issues. Where can they go to connect with you to see if you guys can work together?
Well, initially my website is superstarcommunicator.com. I don't go with anything original, do I?
That's good. It's consistent, easy to find you.
Yeah. Also, I'm on LinkedIn, which is Susan Heaton Wright. There's only one Susan Heaton Wright. Please say that you've listened to the podcast and connect with me, and we can arrange a 15-minute call and just have a chat about what you are wanting to get out of any training, whether it's for your team or individual, and then we can discuss different options.
Yeah, I love that. And we'll make sure we link to all of the ways that you can find Susan just quick on our blog, so that you can get that and as well listen to her podcast, which is fantastic. I've been going through the episodes, some of the earlier ones, which are good, I have to say.
Oh,
I usually, every time I listen to a podcast, I listen to the latest one and then I go like all the way down and go, what was it like at the beginning? And they were good. There was so much information in them. So
thank you. Thank you so much.
Well, Susan, it's been an absolute pleasure to sit and chat with you. I gained so much insight and so many great tips that I'm definitely going to be using going forward. So I really, really appreciate your time. It's just been an honor.
Oh, thank you very much. It's been an honor for me. Thank you.
So if you're in a position where you are looking at getting into the speaking industry, or even if you just want to learn how to communicate more effectively with your team and with your clients, Susan could be a person that could help you. She has worked with companies such as AstraZeneca, Shell, Microsoft, and many more. She also delivers virtual seminars, workshops, and individual trainings. Many of her clients that she's had have gone on to be interviewed on Sky News and BBC, as well as speaking at industry conferences. And she herself can be found regularly interviewed on BBC Radio 5 and other local radios and international podcasts. She's contributed many articles in Forbes, The Guardian, Huffington Post, Thrive Global, The Scotsman, and so many more. And in 2020, she was named and hashtag I also top 100 inspirational female entrepreneurs in the UK. She really is herself a superstar communicator. So to find all of the ways that you can learn more about Susan and discover more about her, head to our website at foxtalksbusiness.ca. Click on blogs on the left-hand side, and you will see this episode with all of the links and a special promotion just for listening in today. So no matter what you're doing today, whether your knees are absolutely shaking because you have to stand up in front of a stage of 1,000, or whether you just have to have a conversation that makes you nervous, find a way to have fun. Because as I always say, if you're not having fun, why are you doing it?